I'm Samantha, 34, and I thought I knew what to expect at my parents' house that evening. Brian, my husband of 3 years, squeezed my hand as we sat down for the first family dinner in months. The table gleamed with Mom's best china while Dad poured wine with practiced precision. Then it happened. Brian leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "We can't stay," he whispered urgently. The look in his eyes made my stomach drop. Something was very wrong. If you're wondering what my husband discovered that made us leave immediately, you're about to find out. To understand why Brian's whispered words shattered my carefully constructed composure that night, you need to know about my childhood. I grew up in a house where appearances meant everything. My mother, Diane, was the queen of social status in our affluent neighborhood, orchestrating every detail of our lives like a meticulous symphony conductor. Nothing was ever good enough, not my grades, not my appearance, not my achievements. "Samantha, stand up straight. No one will respect a woman who slouches," she'd snap while hosting garden parties where I was paraded around like a show pony. "And for heaven's sake, why didn't you wear the dress I laid out? This makes you look washed out." My father, Thomas, was emotionally distant but equally demanding. A successful corporate attorney, he treated family discussions like depositions. "Samantha, your performance in mathematics is subpar. I've arranged for additional tutoring starting tomorrow," he announced at dinner once when I brought home a B+ instead of an A. When I was 12, I spent weeks preparing for a piano recital. Hours of practice until my fingers ached. The night of the performance, I missed one note, just one. "We expected better," was all my father said on the silent car ride home. My mother added, "The Henderson girl played flawlessly. I don't understand why you couldn't do the same." I became a master at people-pleasing, constantly seeking approval that never truly came. My bedroom walls were lined with academic awards and athletic trophies that failed to impress them. By high school, I developed severe anxiety, having panic attacks before family events where I knew I'd be evaluated and found wanting. College was my first taste of freedom. During sophomore year, I literally bumped into Brian at the campus bookstore, sending his engineering textbooks flying. He laughed instead of getting annoyed, helped me pick up my own scattered books, and asked me to coffee. There was something so genuine about him, warm brown eyes that actually saw me, not some projection of who I should be. Brian came from a family that expressed love unconditionally. The first time he took me home to meet Carol and James, his parents, I sat stiffly at their kitchen table waiting for the judgment to begin. Instead, his mother hugged me, his father told terrible dad jokes, and no one commented on my hair or clothes or career aspirations. It was disorienting. "Your parents seem nice," I said carefully on the drive back to campus. Brian glanced over. "They're normal." I started seeing my upbringing for what it was, manipulative and controlling. He never pushed, just asked thoughtful questions that helped me recognize patterns I'd normalized. We dated for 3 years before getting engaged. When I called to tell my parents, my mother's first response was, "Well, I suppose spring would be best for photographs. I'll contact the club about availability." The wedding planning became a battleground. My mother insisted on a 300-person guest list despite our wishes for something intimate. My father questioned Brian's financial prospects at every turn. When we chose a small venue, my mother cried for days about embarrassment in front of her friends. Brian's patience finally snapped when my parents tried changing our honeymoon plans without consulting us. "They're treating you like a child, Sam," he said. "We need to set boundaries." Brian's family watched in bewildered concern as my mother criticized the flowers during the reception and my father gave a toast that focused more on his own career achievements than our marriage. After the wedding, we limited contact. The weekly phone calls dwindled to monthly, then bi-monthly. The freedom was exhilarating but also racked me with guilt. Brian never pressured me either way, simply supporting whatever relationship I wanted with my family. 2 years passed relatively peacefully. Then came my mother's health scare. A benign tumor successfully removed, but it shook me. My father called personally rather than having his assistant reach out for family matters. "Maybe they've changed," I told Brian hopefully. "People sometimes reassess their priorities after health crises." Brian was skeptical but supportive. "Just be careful, Sam. I don't want to see you hurt again." Though I noticed his jaw tighten when I mentioned my father would be joining us. "Whatever happens, he promised, taking my hands in his. We're a team. I'm with you every step of the way. The anxiety began building 24 hours before we were due at my parents' house. I stood in front of our bedroom closet, discarding outfit after outfit onto the growing pile on our bed. Too casual. Too bright. Too professional. I muttered, examining and rejecting each option. Brian leaned against the doorframe, watching me with concern. Sam, you've tried on half your wardrobe. Your mom will find something to criticize no matter what you wear. That's her issue, not yours. I just want things to go smoothly, I said, pulling out a conservative blue dress I hadn't worn in years. This is our chance to start fresh. That morning, I'd spent 2 hours at the mall searching for the perfect hostess gift. The first bouquet wasn't fresh enough, the wine not exclusive enough, the chocolates too common. I finally settled on an artisanal olive oil my mother had once mentioned admiring at a friend's house. We need to talk about boundaries before tomorrow, Brian said, sitting beside me on the bed. What happens if they start criticizing you? I folded a sweater, avoiding his eyes. They're making an effort, Brian. We should too. Making an effort doesn't mean we accept disrespect, he said gently. Remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago? The memory made me wince. We'd accepted a holiday invitation, only for my father to spend dinner interrogating Brian about his company's valuation and my mother to ask when I planned to fix my hair color. We'd left early with my mother's accusations of ingratitude ringing in our ears. That was before Mom's health scare, I insisted. People change. My phone rang, my mother's ringtone. I answered with forced cheerfulness. Samantha, I'm just confirming you're still coming tomorrow. Your father's looking forward to it. Her voice was pleasant, but I could hear the underlying tension. Yes, Mom. Brian and I will be there at 6. Wonderful. Oh, and is Brian still on that restricted diet? I seem to remember he doesn't eat shellfish. He's allergic to shellfish, Mom. It's not a diet choice. A pause. Well, I've already planned the menu around my garlic butter scallops. I'm sure he can just eat around them. After hanging up, I caught Brian's raised eyebrow. She's making scallops, I admitted. Of course she is, he said without surprise. Sam, your mom knows I ended up in the ER last time I accidentally ate shellfish. I felt the familiar twist of being caught between loyalties. I'll bring your allergy medication just in case. That night, I dreamed I was sitting at an endlessly long dining table, my parents at the distant opposite end, watching as I tried to cut a steak that kept regenerating with every slice. I woke at 3 a.m., sweating and disoriented. Brian pulled me close, his voice groggy with sleep. Bad dream. They're never going to change, are they? I whispered into the darkness. His silence was answer enough. Morning brought renewed determination. I showered, straightened my hair the way my mother preferred, applied makeup carefully, and chose the blue dress with sensible heels. Brian watched me transform into the daughter my parents expected. The drive to my parents' suburban estate took 40 minutes, each mile ratcheting up my anxiety. I rehearsed neutral conversation topics in my head, planning how to deflect potential criticism. Brian drove in supportive silence, occasionally squeezing my hand when he noticed me fidgeting. As we turned onto the tree-lined street where I grew up, the imposing houses with their manicured lawns brought back a flood of memories. Bike rides cut short for etiquette lessons. We can leave anytime you want. Just say the word. I nodded, clutching the olive oil gift bag like a shield. They're just my parents. How bad could it be? The front door opened before we reached it. My mother stood framed in the entrance, elegant in a tailored outfit, her silver blonde hair styled impeccably. Behind her loomed my father. The tech sector's taken quite a hit this quarter. Affecting your company at all? No hello. No good to see you. Straight to assessing Brian's financial stability, we stepped into the foyer, and I felt myself shrinking into the role I'd played my entire childhood. Eager to please, desperate for approval and already failing. Brian's reassuring presence at my side was the only thing keeping me from reverting completely. The evening I'd convinced myself would be different was already following the old, familiar script. My parents' house hadn't changed since my last visit, a showcase rather than a home. The marble foyer gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Fresh flower arrangements sat at precisely measured intervals. Every surface was immaculate, untouched by actual living. We redid the dining room, my mother announced, leading us through the living area where white couches remained as forbidden to sit on as they had been in my childhood. The dining room featured a new table, glass and dark wood, coldly elegant like everything else in the house. The place settings were formal. Multiple forks, crystal glasses, napkins folded into complex shapes. A centerpiece of white orchids completed the magazine-worthy scene. "You've lost weight," my mother observed as I took my seat. "Your face looks gaunt. Are you eating properly?" And there it was, the first direct criticism delivered just 4 minutes after our arrival. "I'm the same weight as always, Mom," I replied. "But I'd be interested in your perspective." My father launched into a monologue about investment opportunities, punctuated with subtle digs about real wealth creation versus salaried positions. I watched Brian maintain a neutral expression despite the condescension. The first course arrived, a salad with walnuts despite my documented allergy. I quietly pushed the nuts aside while my mother pretended not to notice. "Caroline Peterson's daughter just made partner at Goldman Sachs," my mother commented between delicate bites. 32 and already so accomplished. "You remember Melissa, don't you, Samantha? She always said you were such a good follower in the school plays." I forced a smile. "That's wonderful for Melissa. The Henderson's son just bought a summer home in the Hamptons," she continued. "And he's younger than you, Brian." Brian nodded politely. "Good for him." "Mom, I'm married," I reminded her, feeling my cheeks burn. "Of course you are, dear. I was just making conversation." As the main course approached, I excused myself to the bathroom, already seeing the confident woman I'd become in the outside world fading into the insecure daughter I'd always been here. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. "You okay? Need a break?" I found my mother serving the promised scallop dish. Brian's plate had scallops as well, despite his life-threatening allergy. "Mom, Brian can't eat shellfish. He's severely allergic. Cross-contamination could send him to the hospital," I said firmly. "Well, there's bread," she offered, as though that settled the matter. Brian handled it gracefully. "Don't worry about it, Diane. I had a late lunch." My father emerged from a brief absence, having taken a business call during dinner. He studied Brian with new interest. "I was just speaking with Harold Winters." My father nodded slowly. "Harold mentioned some interesting developments at your company. Potential buyout in the works." Brian took a sip of water. "I'm not privy to those discussions, if they exist." A tense silence followed, broken by my mother. "Samantha, I ran into your old art teacher last week. She always said you had modest talent but lacked commitment." I'd recently been promoted to creative director at my agency, a fact I proudly shared with my mother on the phone. "Actually, my team just won a national advertising award," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother waved dismissively. "Yes, but it's also commercial, isn't it? Jessica's architectural firm designs buildings that will stand for generations. That's a legacy." The mention of my sister made my stomach clench. Jessica had always been the golden child, achieving the perfect grades, perfect career, and perfect family that my parents had demanded. "How is Jessica?" I asked cautiously. My mother brightened. "Absolutely thriving. Her husband Peter made partner. The twins got into that exclusive gifted program, and Jessica's firm is designing the new wing for the art museum." "That's wonderful," I said automatically. "We should try to get together sometime." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They had invited my sister and her family without telling me, turning what was supposedly a reconciliation dinner into another opportunity to compare us. "You didn't mention Jessica was coming," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "Didn't I? It must have slipped my mind," my mother replied, though the gleam in her eye told me it was entirely intentional. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. My father stood. "Brian, why don't you join me in my study for a moment while the ladies greet Jessica? I have a business proposition that might interest you." Brian glanced at me, silently asking if I'd be okay. I nodded slightly, and he followed my father out. Minutes later, the perfect family entered. Jessica, impeccably dressed with not a hair out of place. Peter, successful and confident. And their identical twins, Madison and Mason, 7 years old and already poised like miniature adults. "Samantha! What a surprise!" Jessica exclaimed, watching my mother transform into a doting grandmother, a side of her I'd never witnessed directed toward me. The contrast was painful, confirming what I'd always suspected. The problem had never been that my mother couldn't show love, but that she chose not to show it to me. After several minutes, Brian returned with my father. One glance at Brian's face told me something was very wrong. His expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight flush creeping up his neck that appeared only when he was truly angry. My father, by contrast, looked smug as he welcomed Jessica and her family. "We've been thinking about family legacy. As you know, the house next door is coming on the market. We've made arrangements to purchase it as an investment." My father took over. "We'd like to help one of our daughters and her family become our neighbors. It's a significant opportunity. The neighborhood has appreciated considerably." My mother continued the clearly rehearsed speech. Of course, there would be certain expectations: participation in community events, regular family dinners, proper maintenance of the property to neighborhood standards. "But we're prepared to cover the down payment and subsidize the mortgage considerably." The unspoken competition hung in the air. Jessica glanced uncomfortably between our parents and me. "That's very generous," Peter said diplomatically. My mother nodded. "We thought so. Or, we'd need to discuss the particulars with the interested parties. Career stability, family planning, financial responsibility, all factors to consider." As she spoke, Brian leaned close to my ear, his voice low and urgent. "We can't stay," he whispered, his hand finding mine under the table. The intensity in his eyes made my heart race. Whatever had happened in my father's study had pushed him to a breaking point. Just as I was about to ask why, my mother's voice cut through. "Samantha, it's rude to whisper at the table." I turned to Brian, ignoring my mother's disapproving stare. "What happened?" I asked quietly. "Not here," Brian replied, his eyes conveying the seriousness of whatever had transpired. "Samantha." My father's authoritative voice boomed. "Your husband and I had a frank discussion about his career prospects and your future plans. I've offered some guidance that he seems reluctant to accept. Better compensation. And with the house next door, you could finally start a proper family under our guidance." "Under your control, you mean," Brian said, his voice level but firm. My father's expression hardened. "I don't appreciate your tone, especially after the generosity we've extended. Perhaps my daughter should hear exactly what we discussed in private." "I'd like that," I said, finding my voice. "Brian." Brian took a deep breath. "Your father informed me that his offer to help us purchase the house comes with conditions. He's arranged a position for me at Harold Winter's firm, a position I neither want nor am qualified for. He also suggested that if we want to be taken seriously for this opportunity, we should be starting a family immediately. When I explained we weren't ready for children yet, he implied that was your deficiency as a wife." Shocked silence fell over the table. Jessica stared at her plate while Peter shifted uncomfortably. "That's not exactly what I said," my father countered, though his expression confirmed the truth. "I merely pointed out that at 34, Samantha's biological clock is a consideration, and the position would be a significant step up from your current situation." "My situation is a senior engineering role at a company I helped build," Brian replied evenly. "A company that just secured Series C funding, which your friend Harold knows very well, since he tried to invest and was turned down." My mother gasped. "There's no need for this hostility. We're trying to help you." "No," I said, the words surprisingly steady. "You're trying to control us. Like you always have." "Samantha." My mother's shock seemed genuine, as though the idea that her behavior was controlling had never occurred to her. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Brian's right. We need to leave." My mother's eyes welled with tears, a tactical display I'd seen countless times. "After everything we've done for you? This is how you repay our generosity." "What generosity, Mom? The dinner where you served food that could send Brian to the hospital? The opportunity that comes with strings attached?" Or maybe the surprise ambush with Jessica's family to remind me how I don't measure up. Jessica winced. Sam. I didn't know. My father cut her off. That's enough. Samantha, you're being hysterical and embarrassing yourself in front of your sister's family. No, Dad. For once I'm seeing things clearly. I turned to Brian, drawing strength from his supportive presence. Let's go. My mother stood, tears strategically falling. If you walk out that door, let me tell you about family obligations. Family supports each other unconditionally. Family respects boundaries. Family loves without keeping score. What you're describing isn't family. It's a transaction. How dare you speak to your mother that way? My father growled, rising to his feet. I dare because I'm an adult who's spent years in therapy undoing the damage you both caused, I replied, surprising myself with the admission. Do you know what my therapist called your parenting style? Emotionally abusive. My mother gasped dramatically. We gave you everything. Private schools, dance lessons, summer camps. Everything except acceptance and unconditional love. I finished for her. Everything except permission to be myself instead of who you wanted me to be. Jessica, to my surprise, spoke up. Mom, Dad, Sam has a point. You've always been harder on her. And the way you sprung this dinner on both of us wasn't fair. My mother turned betrayed eyes to Jessica. We've always supported you both equally. That's not true and you know it, Jessica said quietly. The difference is I played by your rules and Sam had the courage to forge her own path. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. Enough. Samantha, you've clearly been influenced by your husband's disrespect. I suggest you both leave and reconsider your position. Our offer has an expiration date. So does my patience, I said, gathering my purse. Brian and I have built a life we're proud of. But we won't be accepting any offers with conditions attached. As we turned to leave, my mother called out, Samantha Catherine Williams, if you walk out now, don't expect to remain in the will. I paused at the doorway, years of conditioning making the threat land with intended impact. But then I looked at Brian, steady, loving Brian who saw me for who I truly was, and found the strength to reply, Keep your money, Mom. I'd rather have my freedom. We walked out, leaving stunned silence behind us. My body shaking with the release of decades of pent-up emotions. Brian started the car but didn't drive, instead gathering me into his arms as best he could across the center console. I'm so proud of you, he whispered into my hair. So incredibly proud. Did you hear what I said to them? I gasped between sobs. I can't believe I said those things. You told the truth. He said simply. It needed to be said. As my breathing steadied, I pulled back to look at him. What exactly did my father say to you in his study? Brian's expression darkened. Beyond what I already mentioned. He implied that I was holding you back from your true potential by encouraging your independence. He suggested that if I truly cared about your happiness, I'd convince you to accept their offer and their conditions. He hesitated, and he hinted that he had enough connections to make things difficult for me professionally if I stood in the way. Fresh anger cut through my emotional exhaustion. He threatened you. In the polite, plausibly deniable way of corporate lawyers, yes. I wiped away tears, smearing expensive makeup across my face. And that's when you decided we needed to leave? Brian nodded. I could handle the insults and the job manipulation. But when he suggested that I should control you for your own good, as if you were property to be managed rather than a brilliant, capable woman, that crossed a line I couldn't ignore. In that moment, looking at my husband defending not just me but my autonomy, I felt a clarity I'd been searching for my entire life. The dinner hadn't been a disappointment, it had been a gift. Final confirmation that no amount of hoping or pretending would transform my parents into the supportive family I deserved. Let's go home, I said finally. Are you sure? We could get a hotel if you need time to process. I shook my head. No. I want to go home, our home. The one we built together without their interference or judgment. As Brian pulled away from the house that had never truly been a home to me, I didn't look back. The weight that had pressed on my chest for as long as I could remember began to lift, replaced by something unfamiliar but welcome. Freedom. We didn't make it far. About 2 miles from my parents' house, the emotional adrenaline crashed, leaving me shaking and nauseated. Brian pulled into the parking lot of a small park where I'd often come as a teenager when I needed escape. "Talk to me, Sam," he said gently, turning in his seat to face me. "What do you need right now?" I stared out at the familiar swing sets, now shadows in the evening light. "I need to understand what just happened. All of it." Brian hesitated. "Are you sure you want the complete picture? Your father said some things that were deliberately cruel." "I need to know," I insisted. "I've spent my whole life with half-truths and manipulations. Please just give me the unfiltered reality." He took a deep breath. "When your father asked me to his study, he closed the door and immediately dropped the polite act. He said he'd been investigating my company, having Harold Winters dig for dirt. When that didn't yield anything useful, he shifted tactics." Brian's jaw tightened at the memory. "He laid out his proposition. They'd buy the house next door and help us with the mortgage if I accepted a position at Winters' firm where he could keep an eye on my development. When I explained I wasn't interested in changing companies, he suggested I clearly didn't have your best interests at heart." My stomach churned. "And the comments about children?" "He said that at your age we were being irresponsible by delaying parenthood, and that your mother could fix your priorities if we lived next door. When I explained that our family planning was our business, he implied that I was selfishly keeping you from your natural role as a mother." Tears of anger burned in my eyes. As if I haven't spent years considering whether I even want children after the parenting example I had. "There's more," Brian said reluctantly. "When I made it clear I wasn't interested in his offer, he mentioned that Harold Winters sits on several industry boards that could make things challenging for my career. Then he suggested that perhaps your loyalty to me was preventing you from accepting their generosity, and that they could help you see the situation more clearly, if given time alone with you." Brian agreed. "When he started talking about getting you alone to fix your thinking, I knew we had to leave immediately." My phone buzzed with incoming texts, my mother, then my father, then Jessica. I silenced it without reading the messages. "What happens now?" I asked, feeling simultaneously empty and overflowing with emotion. "Whatever you want," Brian said. "We can find a hotel for tonight, drive home, call some friends. Anything you need." I considered our options, then made a decision that surprised even me. "I want to go back." Brian's eyebrows shot up. "Back to your parents?" "Sam, I don't think." "Not to stay," I clarified. "To finish what we started. I've spent my entire life running from confrontations with them, making excuses for their behavior, pretending their manipulation was normal. For once, I want to say exactly what I think without storming out or breaking down." Brian studied my face. "Are you sure? You don't owe them any explanations." "I don't," I agreed. "But I owe myself this closure." After a moment he nodded. "Okay, but we go together, we say what needs to be said. And then we leave regardless of their reaction. Deal?" "Deal." 20 minutes later, we pulled back into my parents' circular driveway. Jessica's car was still there. Which wasn't surprising. No dramatic exit would be permitted in her perfect family narrative. My mother opened the door before we could knock. "We have something to say, and then we're leaving." My father appeared from his study, scowling. "If you've come to apologize, perhaps we can salvage this evening." "We haven't come to apologize," Brian stated firmly. In the living room, Jessica, Peter, and the twins sat in uncomfortable silence, clearly having witnessed some parental drama after our departure. "Samantha," my mother began, her voice taking on the martyred tone I knew well. "Families have disagreements, but your behavior was beyond." "Stop," I interrupted, the single word silencing her. "For once, you're going to listen to me without interruption." Surprise flashed across her face. I had never directly cut her off before. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect career. Nothing was ever enough because you kept moving the target. What I've realized tonight is that it was never about my success or happiness. It was about your control." My father stepped forward. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," I said, turning to him. You threatened my husband's career because he wouldn't surrender his autonomy or mine. You tried to bribe us with a house that comes with strings attached to every square foot. There's a difference. The life Brian and I have built together makes me happy. My career fulfills me. Our timeline for major life decisions belongs to us, not you. Jessica stood up, surprising everyone. She's right, Mom, Dad. The constant judgment, the impossible standards, the comparisons, it's toxic. My mother gasped. Jessica, not you too. After everything we've done. That's just it, Jessica interrupted. Everything comes with conditions. Even for me, the perfect daughter. Do you know how exhausting it is? How Peter and I fight after every visit because I turn into someone else around you. How the twins are already showing anxiety about meeting your expectations. My father's face darkened. I don't appreciate this coordinated attack. We've provided every advantage, every opportunity. And remind us of it constantly, I finished. Love shouldn't come with an itemized bill, Dad. Name one thing you've ever sacrificed for my happiness rather than your image. Her silence was deafening. That's what I thought, I said. I didn't come back to argue or to hurt you. I came to say that I'm done pretending. I'm done making excuses for how you treat me. I'm done hoping that someday you'll see me, the real me, and find me worthy of your love. Of course we love you. My mother protested weakly. You love the idea of me, the daughter you tried to shape me into. But that's not love. That's ownership. My father's expression shifted from anger to calculation. What exactly do you want from us, Samantha? Money without conditions? The house without obligations? His question revealed just how fundamentally he misunderstood. Jessica stepped beside me, her presence a surprise reinforcement. The same goes for me and my family. The manipulation stops now, or you'll lose relationships with both your daughters. The twins looked confused but relieved at their mother's stance. Peter moved to stand supportively behind his wife, mirroring Brian's position beside me. My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. My father cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all take some time to cool down. Emotions are running high. It was a non-answer. A delay tactic I recognize from countless childhood confrontations. This time I wouldn't accept it. Take all the time you need, I said. Thank you for standing with me. She squeezed my hand. Long overdue. Call me tomorrow. I nodded, then faced my parents one last time. Goodbye for now. I hope this isn't the end. But that's up to you. As Brian and I walked out, my mother called after us. Samantha, you're making a terrible mistake. Families don't issue ultimatums. I paused at the door. How are you feeling? I considered the question, searching for the right words to describe the complex emotions swirling inside me. Like I just put down something incredibly heavy that I've been carrying my whole life. He reached across to take my hand. I am so incredibly proud of you. As we drove away for the second time that night, I realized the heaviness in my chest had been replaced by something unfamiliar but welcome. Peace. Not happiness, there was grief too. For the parents I'd never truly had and might never have. But underneath the complicated emotions lay a foundation of certainty. For the first time in my life, I had stood in my truth without apology. Whatever happened next, I would face it as my authentic self, not as the daughter my parents had tried to create. We decided against driving the 2 hours home that night. Instead, Brian found a hotel nearby, a neutral space where I could begin processing the emotional earthquake of the evening. The room was generic and impersonal. Beige walls, standard artwork, unfamiliar bed. Yet it felt safer than any childhood bedroom had ever been. I sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing the blue dress I'd chosen so carefully that morning. I can't believe what just happened. Brian loosened his tie, watching me with concern. Do you regret going back? No, I said after a moment's reflection. For once, I said exactly what I meant without apologizing for having needs or feelings. I've never done that with them before. He sat beside me, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. Whatever happens next, I'm with you every step of the way. What if they never change? Your worth isn't determined by their ability to recognize it. That night, I slept fitfully, dreams filled with fragments of the confrontation. In some versions, my parents transformed into monsters. In others, they crumbled to dust when I stood up to them. I woke early, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Brian's steady breathing beside me a comforting anchor. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. 5 from Jessica, expressing solidarity and suggesting lunch next week. Just the two of us. The rest were from my parents. I silenced the phone without responding and ordered room service breakfast, suddenly ravenous after barely eating at dinner. "What do you want to do today?" Brian asked as we shared toast and coffee. "Go home," I said decisively. "Back to our life. I don't want to let this consume any more of our time." The drive home was quieter, less fraught with the tension of the previous day. Somewhere past the halfway mark, I broke the comfortable silence. "I should find a new therapist." Brian glanced over. "I think that's a good idea." "I stopped going after we got married," I admitted. "I thought I'd worked through most of it, but clearly there's more to unpack." "I'll support you however you need," he promised. The next week unfolded in a surreal dichotomy. My external professional life continuing normally, while my internal emotional landscape underwent seismic shifts. My mother called daily. My father's approach was more strategic, emails outlining reasonable compromises that still centered around their control, just with more subtle packaging. I didn't respond to either of them, focusing instead on finding a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Lori Kennedy had kind eyes and a direct manner that cut through my well-practiced deflections. "Tell me about your parents," she said in our first session. "There." I started with the usual excuses, then stopped myself. "They're controlling and manipulative. And I've spent my life trying to earn love that always came with conditions." She nodded, no judgment in her expression. "That's a powerful realization. When did you first recognize this pattern? The conditional love tied to performance and compliance. The emotional manipulation disguised as parental concern. What you're describing is a form of emotional abuse," she explained during our third session. Children in these environments develop certain coping mechanisms: perfectionism, people-pleasing, hypervigilance. The labels both hurt and healed, giving structure to experiences I'd previously internalized as personal failings. Jessica and I met for lunch as promised, our first meeting without parental supervision in years. Away from our parents' influence, I discovered a sister I barely knew. Funny, insightful, and carrying her own scars from our upbringing. "I always envied you," she confessed over salads. "You escaped. I'm still playing the role they created for me." "The perfect daughter isn't any happier than the disappointing one," I observed. She laughed without humor. "Exactly. And I'm afraid of my parents' disapproval." "It's not pathetic," I assured her. "It's conditioning. But you can break it. We both can." We began meeting regularly, sometimes with our husbands. She sent flying monkeys, family friends and distant relatives, to plead her case about how heartbroken my parents were over my cruel abandonment. Dear Kennedy helped me draft a formal letter establishing clear boundaries. No unannounced visits, no manipulative messages through third parties, respect for my space and decisions. I sent it certified mail to ensure they couldn't claim it never arrived. The response came 3 days later. A 15-page handwritten letter from my mother, the ink blotched with tears, or water strategically applied to create that impression. It contained every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. Guilt, I cry myself to sleep every night. Martyrdom, after all we've sacrificed. Health concerns, your father's blood pressure. And threats disguised as concern, we worry about Brian's influence on you. Not once did it acknowledge my feelings or experience. Not once did it contain the words, "I'm sorry." "This is actually helpful," Dr. Kennedy noted when I brought the letter to our session. "It confirms that your decision to create distance was necessary for your well-being." Thanksgiving arrived, the first major holiday since the confrontation. My parents sent formal invitations as though nothing had happened, along with plane tickets and a note about the importance of family traditions. I declined politely but firmly. Instead, several friends joined us, creating a table full of genuine warmth and acceptance. "Is this what normal family holidays feel like?" I whispered to Brian as we watched everyone laughing in our living room. He kissed my temple. This is what chosen family feels like. The months passed. A threat from my father about removing me from their will, if this estrangement continues. I didn't respond. The financial threat that would once have terrified me now seemed like confirmation that I'd made the right choice. Winter melted into spring. I continued therapy. Brian and I began renovating our apartment, creating a space that reflected our shared aesthetic, rather than what my mother would approve of. In April, 6 months after the confrontation, another letter arrived from my mother. Unlike the previous emotional manipulations, this one was different, shorter, less dramatic, but still missing any genuine accountability. But only if it can be based on mutual respect. That would require acknowledgement of the dynamics that led to our current situation, and a commitment to change. The ball was in their court. I felt no urgency about their response, no anxiety about whether they would meet my conditions. For the first time in my life, my well-being wasn't dependent on their approval. As 1 year approached since that fateful dinner, I realized how much had changed. The anxious, people-pleasing woman who had spent hours choosing the perfect outfit and hostess gift had been replaced by someone stronger, more authentic, and at peace with her boundaries. Do you ever regret it? I regret that they couldn't be the parents I needed. I regret that they likely never will be. But standing up for myself? Protecting our marriage from their manipulation? Never. He took my hand, our fingers intertwining comfortably. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Though to be fair, she was always there, just waiting for permission to emerge. Permission I had to give myself. I realized aloud. No one else could do it for me. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a beauty I would once have been too preoccupied with external validation to fully appreciate. Now I breathed it in deeply, present in the moment and grateful for the hard-won peace I'd found. The journey wasn't over. Real healing rarely follows a neat, linear path. There would be more difficult decisions ahead, more boundaries to defend, more growth to embrace. But for the first time, 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, spring bloomed again. Cherry blossoms lined our street, their delicate pink petals symbolizing the beauty that can emerge after winter's harshness. We've been doing some reflection and have things we'd like to discuss. Please consider giving us this chance. No manipulation. No guilt. Just a simple request. What are you thinking? Brian asked, noticing my contemplative expression. They want to meet, I said, turning the screen toward him. What do you think? He read the message carefully. It seems different from their usual approach. More direct, less manipulative. But the decision is yours, Sam. What do you want? The question would have paralyzed me a year ago, my desire to please others overriding my own needs. Now, I could answer honestly. I think I want to hear what they have to say, I replied. With boundaries in place. Establishing clear expectations and exit strategies if the meeting turned manipulative. Remember, she advised, you're not responsible for their feelings or reactions. You're only responsible for expressing your truth with integrity. The day arrived with a mixture of sunshine and spring showers, nature's own reflection of my emotional forecast. Brian offered to accompany me, but I decided to go alone, not because I feared his presence would upset my parents, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could maintain boundaries without external support. I'll be fine, I assured him, drawing strength from the woman I'd become over the past year. My parents were already seated when I arrived, both looking slightly older than I remembered. My mother had foregone her usual perfect makeup for a more natural look. My father seemed less imposing without his typical power suit, dressed instead in casual attire I rarely saw him wear. Samantha, my mother said, half rising as I approached. Uncertainty replaced her usual confident demeanor. Thank you for coming. I sat across from them, hands folded calmly in my lap. You wanted to talk. I'm listening. My father cleared his throat. We've been seeing a family therapist, he began, the admission clearly difficult for him. At Jessica's insistence initially, but it's been enlightening. We've learned some things about ourselves, my mother continued. Patterns we weren't aware of. Ways our own upbringing shaped how we parented you and Jessica. I nodded but remained silent, waiting. Our therapist suggested we do some reading, my father said, uncomfortable with my lack of response. Books about. He hesitated. Narcissistic parenting styles. The term hung between us, previously unspoken in their presence. We recognized ourselves, my mother admitted, her voice small. Not in everything, but in enough to be concerning. I see. I said, still cautious. We're not asking for immediate forgiveness, my father continued. We understand trust needs to be rebuilt. But we'd like the opportunity to try. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, maintaining the direct communication style I'd cultivated over the past year. Regular meetings, perhaps monthly on neutral ground, my mother suggested, with clear boundaries that we promise to respect. No unannounced visits, no manipulation through gifts or financial threats, no attempting to control your life choices. And if I have children one day? I asked, testing their sincerity. What then? They exchanged glances. My father spoke first. Then we would hope to be grandparents who support your parenting decisions, rather than undermining them. We've done a lot wrong, my mother added, genuine emotion cracking her usually perfect facade. We don't want to lose the chance to do something right. I considered their words carefully. I appreciate your willingness to examine these patterns. I've been doing the same work this past year, understanding how my upbringing shaped me and working to heal from it. Your therapist seems to have helped you, my mother observed. She has, I confirmed. And I'll continue working with her regardless of what happens between us. That seems wise, my father said, a simple acknowledgement that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I'm willing to try these monthly meetings, I decided. But I need you to understand something important. I'm not the same person who left your house that night. I won't compromise my boundaries or my authentic self to make you comfortable. This is going to work. You need to accept me exactly as I am, not as you wish I would be. We're trying to learn how to do that, my mother said softly. As I drove home afterward, I felt neither the elation of reconciliation nor the despair of rejection. Just a quiet determination to navigate this new chapter with integrity and self-respect. Brian was waiting, concern evident in his expression. How did it go? They're trying, I said, settling beside him on our couch. They've been seeing a therapist, using terms like narcissistic parenting and boundaries. It was unexpected. Do you believe them? He asked, not skeptically but with genuine curiosity. I believe they're uncomfortable enough with the estrangement to attempt change, I replied thoughtfully. Whether they can sustain it when faced with my continued independence remains to be seen. But I'm willing to find out, cautiously. Over the following months we established a new pattern. Monthly lunches with clear beginnings and endings. No discussions of financial matters or attempts to control my choices. When old patterns emerged, my mother's subtle criticism or my father's authoritative pronouncements, I named them directly and watched as they struggled, sometimes successfully and sometimes not, to course correct. Our relationship remained a work in progress, but progress it was, small, imperfect, but genuine. As summer approached, life delivered an unexpected development. My hand resting on my still flat stomach. With the examples I had growing up? The kind who knows exactly what not to do, he replied confidently. The fact that you're asking these questions already puts you leagues ahead, he assured me. And you won't be doing it alone. I decided not to tell my parents immediately, using the time to strengthen my own resolve about the kind of mother I wanted to be. I wrote a letter I never intended to send, an emotional exercise Dr. Kennedy suggested. Dear Mom and Dad. It began. As I prepare to become a parent myself, I make these promises to my child, promises I wish had been made to me. I promise to love you unconditionally, not based on your performance or compliance. I promise to respect your boundaries and individuality, even when they differ from my expectations. I promise to apologize when I'm wrong, and to grow alongside you rather than demanding you accommodate my flaws. The exercise clarified my commitment to different parenting patterns, and prepared me for the eventual conversation with my parents about their role as grandparents. When I finally shared the news during one of our monthly lunches, I accompanied it with clear expectations. I'm excited to become a mother, and I hope you can be positive presences in my child's life. But that will depend on your ability to respect our parenting decisions and boundaries. To my surprise, they received the news and conditions with measured joy rather than entitlement. "We understand," my father said, my mother nodding beside him. "We've been learning about being supportive rather than controlling. We want to get this right. We won't be perfect," my mother added with unusual self-awareness, "but we're committed to trying. This grandchild is a gift we don't take for granted." As my pregnancy progressed, I reconnected with extended family members my parents had previously isolated from us. My father's sister Laura, who had been deemed too bohemian for proper influence. My mother's cousin Daniel, whose decision to pursue art instead of law had made him persona non grata. These relationships brought new dimensions of family support, untainted by manipulation. Brian's parents, Carol and James, remained steady pillars of healthy family dynamics. "You know we're here for whatever you need," Carol assured me during their visit, including advice on setting boundaries with new grandparents. The nursery took shape in our apartment, a sunny room with walls painted pale yellow. As I arranged stuffed animals and books, I contemplated the journey that had brought me here. Standing up to my parents hadn't just changed our relationship, it had transformed all my connections. I no longer maintained friendships out of obligation or fear of confrontation. I spoke up in professional settings rather than deferring to louder voices. I expressed needs and desires without apology. In therapy, Dr. Kennedy and I shifted focus from healing past wounds to building future resilience. "You've done remarkable work," she observed during one session. "The real test of growth isn't whether challenges arise, they always will, but how differently you respond to them." In early spring, almost 2 years after that pivotal dinner, our daughter Lily entered the world. 7 pounds of possibility and hope. Holding her, I felt a fierce protectiveness, not just of her physical safety but of her emotional well-being and authentic self. My parents met her a week later, their behavior tentative and respectful. When my mother automatically reached to adjust Lily's blanket, she caught herself asking instead, "Would you like me to fix that?" A small moment but significant in its recognition of boundaries. The path forward remained complex. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, requiring renewed commitment to healthier dynamics. My father still sometimes slipped into authoritative pronouncements about child-rearing. My mother occasionally made subtle comparative comments about Jessica's parenting choices. Each transgression required direct addressing, sometimes causing temporary setbacks in our healing relationship, but ultimately strengthening the foundation of mutual respect we were struggling to build. The final test came when they made one last attempt at the house next door. "We've purchased it as an investment," my father explained during a visit. "We thought perhaps you, Brian, and Lily might consider moving there. No strings attached this time, just family nearby." I exchanged glances with Brian before responding. "We appreciate the thought, but we're happy where we are. Our home is the one we've created together." My mother's disappointment was visible but contained. "We understand. The offer remains open if you ever change your mind, but we won't mention it again unless you do." Their acceptance of our decision without manipulation or guilt-tripping confirmed how far we'd come. As Lily's first birthday approached, in her place stood someone stronger, more authentic, and at peace with both her boundaries and her capacity for conditional forgiveness. The healing wasn't perfect or complete. Some wounds were too deep for perfect resolution. But in breaking free from toxic patterns, I discovered something valuable. The courage to walk away from harmful relationships had created space for healthier ones to flourish. My daughter would grow up seeing a mother who valued herself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did it change your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, thank you for being part of this journey with me. Sending you strength and courage for whatever challenges you're facing in your own relationships.